pretty good team.
That was pretty. It was
What
pretty
made
decent.
that team so good, you two?
Welcome back to Clark USA fans. They didn't call ESPN. They didn't call Turner Sports. They didn't go running to the legacy networks that helped carry the WNBA through decades of slow growth, tight budgets, and uphill battles for relevance. Instead, they made one call. They called Caitlin Clark. And that decision speaks louder than any press release ever could. At just 22 years old, Clark isn't simply one of the most recognizable faces in women's basketball. She isn't just a rookie sensation. She isn't just a record-breaking scorer who electrified college arenas and then carried that electricity straight into the professional ranks. She has become something far more strategic, far more valuable, and far more disruptive to the traditional structure of the sport. She has become the pivot point, the chess piece that forces every other move on the board to adjust. When NBC decided to relaunch its basketball ambitions in a major way, it didn't look backward. It didn't anchor its strategy in nostalgia. It didn't lean exclusively on retired legends or established broadcasters to carry the weight of a new era. It looked forward, and it placed Caitlin Clark at the center of that vision. This is not just a broadcasting opportunity. This is not a casual analyst appearance. This is not a celebrity cameo designed to grab a few headlines. This is a power alignment. While the WNBA navigates uncertainty, collective bargaining discussions, union negotiations, long-term revenue questions, and the ever-present tension between growth and sustainability, Clark has positioned herself somewhere entirely different. She now holds a platform that exists beyond the confines of a single league schedule. She holds a paycheck not tied solely to one organization's financial structure. And perhaps most importantly, she holds influence that transcends the painted lines of a hardwood court. That kind of leverage is rare. That kind of leverage shifts ecosystems. Because when NBC announced that Clark would debut as an analyst on February 1st for Lakers versus Knicks at Madison Square Garden, it wasn't subtle. It wasn't cautious. It wasn't experimental in the traditional sense. It was bold. Think about the magnitude of that stage. The Los Angeles Lakers, the New York Knicks, the New York market, the building often referred to as the Mecca of basketball. You don't get higher-profile regular season matchups than that. And NBC didn't ease her in during a midweek secondary broadcast. They didn't hide her on digital-only coverage. They didn't test her in a low-stakes environment. They put her front and center. Then came March 9th, Thunder vs. Knicks, another premium slot, another statement placement. 2 major appearances. 2 national spotlights. 2 opportunities not just to speak about basketball, but to prove that her impact travels beyond playing it. And here's where it becomes even more fascinating. Look at the company she's keeping. She isn't seated next to unknown personalities. She isn't insulated among developmental broadcasters. She's alongside some of the most respected names in the sports media ecosystem. Maria Taylor, a polished and accomplished host trusted on the biggest stages. Carmelo Anthony, a future Hall of Famer whose scoring defined an era. Vince Carter, whose athleticism became cultural currency. Tracy McGrady, one of the most fluid scorers the league has ever seen. And Reggie Miller, synonymous with clutch moments and playoff theatrics. That is not a soft introduction. That is a statement of equivalence.
Back-to-back triples for Caitlin.
NBC is effectively saying, she belongs here. Not as a novelty, not as a symbol, not as a token,
but as a basketball mind.
And that distinction matters. When NBC described Clark as one of the most captivating and dynamic scorers in basketball, not women's basketball, not the WNBA specifically, but basketball, that phrasing was intentional. Words at this level are chosen carefully. Framing defines perception. Perception drives brand equity. By removing the qualifier, NBC reframed the conversation. She is not being presented as a crossover experiment. She is being presented as a core piece of a new era of coverage. This entire initiative, Basketball Night in America, is NBC's answer to the proven success of Football Night in America. It's designed to be flagship programming, appointment viewing, a weekly basketball hub that carries prestige. And at launch, a 22-year-old WNBA player is integral to that blueprint.
Why?
Because the numbers force their hand. When Clark entered the WNBA, the transformation wasn't subtle. The Indiana Fever shifted from rebuilding franchise to national headline in a single season. Arenas that once averaged modest attendance suddenly faced sellouts. Road games became events. Television ratings spiked to levels executives once considered unrealistic for the league's current stage of development. Merchandise pipelines struggled to keep up with demand. Jersey sales surged. Social media engagement metrics rivaled, and in some cases surpassed, those of established NBA veterans. Demographic data revealed something even more critical. She brought in audiences who hadn't previously engaged with the WNBA at all. Younger viewers, casual sports fans, college basketball loyalists who followed her transition, even neutral observers drawn by cultural buzz rather than team allegiance.
Has taken a new step.
Clark lays it in. A little hesitation works.
NBC watched closely. They tracked streaming spikes when her college games appeared behind the Peacock paywall. They studied engagement analytics. They observed how discourse around her transcended sports talk and entered mainstream conversation. And they concluded something simple but powerful. Where Caitlin Clark goes, attention follows. In modern sports media, attention is currency. It drives advertising. It fuels subscription growth. It strengthens negotiating power in rights deals. It builds long-term brand positioning. By embedding Clark into their NBA coverage infrastructure, NBC accomplishes multiple strategic objectives at once. First, they future-proof themselves. If WNBA labor negotiations delay a season, Clark remains on their platform, maintaining audience interest in basketball content. If the season proceeds smoothly, they already have the league's biggest star integrated into their broadcast ecosystem, giving them leverage and synergy when negotiating WNBA coverage expansions. Second, they signal inclusivity without performative gestures. Clark isn't inserted for optics. She's positioned for expertise. That changes the tone entirely. Third, they align themselves with momentum. And momentum in sports media is everything. The WNBA has long fought for consistent mainstream exposure. For decades, it has operated in the shadow of the NBA, sharing infrastructure, but rarely sharing equal spotlight. Clark's emergence disrupted that equilibrium. Suddenly, conversation around women's basketball wasn't confined to dedicated circles. It was everywhere. Debate shows, social platforms, corporate boardrooms. Now, with this NBC move, that disruption enters a new phase. Clark is no longer only a star within a league seeking expansion. She is a brand operating across platforms. And here's the question that lingers beneath it all. Who else in the league currently wields this level of cross-platform leverage? Superstars exist across the WNBA. Championship pedigrees exist. MVP resumes exist. But cross-demographic magnetism at this scale, the kind that alters network strategy, is rare.
Last year, Indiana was 10th in pace. Christy Sides telling us
Clark's influence has forced conversations about salary structures, media rights valuations, endorsement ceilings, and long-term league identity. Sponsors view her as a bridge between traditional sports audiences and new markets. Networks view her as a ratings catalyst. Fans view her as appointment viewing. That trifecta is powerful. And she's just getting started. The risk for NBC is obvious. Placing a young athlete with no long-term professional broadcasting history into high-stakes NBA coverage could backfire. Analysis requires a different skill set than scoring from 30 feet. Studio chemistry can't be manufactured overnight. But NBC isn't making this move blindly. They're betting on intelligence, on basketball IQ, on preparation, on the fact that Clark has navigated pressure at every stage of her career, from record-breaking college performances to the microscope of her WNBA debut, and adapted each time. They're betting that her understanding of spacing, tempo, defensive rotations, and offensive creativity translates into insightful commentary. They're betting that viewers want authenticity over polish. They're betting that her presence broadens the tent of basketball fandom rather than dividing it. And if that bet pays off, the ripple effects could be massive. Imagine a future where WNBA stars regularly analyze NBA games without qualifiers, where crossover visibility becomes standard rather than exceptional, where media ecosystems integrate talent based on influence and insight rather than league hierarchy. Clark's NBC debut isn't just a career milestone. It's a structural test. If audiences embrace her in this role, networks across the industry will take note. If ratings validate the strategy, copycat moves will follow. If advertisers see measurable uplift, budgets will shift accordingly. This is how power consolidates. Not through statements. Through placement. Through platform. Through performance. Caitlin Clark has already proven she can command an arena. Now she steps into a studio built around legends. She steps into conversations historically dominated by retired NBA icons. She steps into a role that carries both scrutiny and opportunity. And she does so not as an outsider invited in, but as a central figure in the launch of a major network initiative. That's not symbolic. That's strategic. As the basketball world watches February 1st unfold at Madison Square Garden, it won't just be evaluating her commentary. It will be evaluating what her presence represents. A shift in narrative authority, a redefinition of star power, a recalibration of who gets to shape the conversation. Welcome back to Clark USA fans, because this isn't just about one debut broadcast. It's about a turning point. And the rest of the league, the networks, and the industry at large are all watching the same question unfold in real time. How far can Caitlin Clark push this? If the early signals are accurate, the answer might be much farther than anyone expected.
Combining for 42 of Vegas's 61 points.
NBC is re-entering NBA broadcasting after years away. They are not the entrenched basketball authority right now. They are building something new. Their Basketball Night in America model aims to replicate the success of Football Night in America, a flagship studio property that became synonymous with Sunday nights. Being part of something at launch is different from joining something already established. At ESPN, Clark would be an addition. At NBC, she is foundational. Ownership over identity matters. It gives her influence in shaping tone, pacing, and even cultural direction of the show. It aligns her growth with the platform's growth. There's also the streaming angle. Peacock is where NBC places premium content, including exclusive NFL broadcasts that have drawn massive digital audiences. Younger viewers increasingly consume sports through streaming ecosystems rather than traditional cable. If Basketball Night in America becomes a Peacock centerpiece, Clark is positioning herself exactly where future audiences are migrating. That's not accidental. That's strategic foresight. She didn't take the safest route. She took the aligned route. And that alignment, platform betting on her betting on platform, creates mutual incentive to succeed. Now, let's talk about weight. Every time Caitlin Clark speaks on that NBC desk, she carries more than her own reputation. Fair or unfair, she represents every woman who wants to be evaluated as a serious basketball analyst. She represents the argument that WNBA players possess elite tactical understanding. She represents a broader push for women occupying spaces historically dominated by men. No male analyst carries that burden. When Carmelo Anthony sits at the desk, he's judged on insight. When Vince Carter offers analysis, he's judged on perspective. When Tracy McGrady critiques a defensive rotation, it reflects on him alone. Clark's commentary, at least initially, will be interpreted through a broader lens. If she excels, it advances perception. If she struggles, critics may unfairly generalize. There is no neutral debut. Every sentence will be clipped, replayed, dissected. That pressure is immense. But pressure has always followed her. From high school phenom status to record-shattering college performances to polarizing WNBA rookie season narratives, she has operated inside scrutiny for years. Defenders tried to rattle her physically. Opposing fans tried to rattle her emotionally.
Don't wait. Transition defense.
Media debates swirled around her constantly. Live television is different, but it is not more intense than some of the environments she has already conquered. The optimistic scenario, The one NBC is clearly banking on is synergy. Her media presence feeds her playing career. Her playing career feeds her media credibility. Fans tune in to watch her analyze NBA matchups. They become accustomed to her voice. They engage with her basketball intellect. When the WNBA season begins, whether smoothly in May 2026 or delayed due to CBA complications, those viewers are more likely to follow her back to the court. That creates a loop. Visibility in winter. Competition in summer. Reinforcement year-round. For decades, WNBA players often disappeared from mainstream sports conversation during the off-season. Clark's NBC presence prevents that silence. Her name stays circulating. Her analysis keeps her relevant to casual NBA viewers who may not regularly watch WNBA games. And when she steps back onto the court for the Indiana Fever, she doesn't return from obscurity. She returns from visibility. That difference could reshape how off-seasons function for elite players going forward. The larger implication is this: Caitlin Clark is becoming platform agnostic. League play, international play, endorsements, broadcast media, streaming properties. Each arm strengthens the others. And in doing so, she may be constructing a blueprint future athletes study carefully. Not just how to dominate on the court, but how to build leverage beyond it. NBC's gamble is high-profile. Clark's gamble is personal. The WNBA's CBA future remains uncertain. ESPN's positioning remains watchful. Peacock's digital ambitions remain aggressive. All of it intersects at one point: a 22-year-old player sitting at a broadcast desk in February, analyzing NBA matchups under studio lights. If she delivers, clearly, confidently, insightfully, the narrative shifts permanently. If she thrives, she expands the definition of what a modern basketball superstar can be. And if that happens, this won't just be remembered as a media experiment. It will be remembered as the moment the center of gravity in basketball media subtly, but decisively moved. Welcome back to Clark USA fans. Because this isn't just coverage. It's evolution. And Caitlin Clark might be standing right at the pivot point of it all.
After that big win on Saturday, not having a letdown, still a long way to go here.
Every single minute Caitlin Clark spends on that NBC broadcast is bigger than television. It's bigger than ratings. It's bigger than one regular season matchup between the Los Angeles Lakers and the New York Knicks at Madison Square Garden. It is, in many ways, a live commercial for an entire league. Because when Caitlin Clark sits at that desk on NBC, speaking to a national NBA audience, she is placing the WNBA in front of viewers who may never intentionally search for it. She is introducing women's basketball to fans who might only tune in for LeBron James highlights or playoff debates. She is bridging audiences that historically have existed in parallel rather than in overlap. And here's the reality. Basketball intelligence does not change depending on who is playing. Reading weak side rotations. Recognizing when a defense shifts from drop coverage to a late switch. Understanding how spacing manipulates help defenders. Anticipating a flare screen before it fully forms. Those skills are universal. The geometry of the sport is the same. The angles are the same. The timing is the same. The mental processing is the same. Clark has demonstrated, repeatedly, that she sees the game in layers most people miss. Throughout her career, from college dominance to her transition into the WNBA, she has displayed an ability to anticipate defensive adjustments before they happen. She understands momentum swings. She manipulates pace. She understands how gravity extends beyond the three-point line. That vision, if articulated clearly, translates seamlessly into analysis. The only difference between elite vision on the court and elite commentary in the studio is communication. And she has already proven she can communicate. In interviews, press conferences, and post-game breakdowns, she doesn't default to cliches. She explains why something worked. She identifies reads. She references positioning. She talks about timing, not just effort. That level of detail is what NBC is betting on. If NBC is smart, and this move suggests they are, they won't try to mold her into a generic studio personality. They won't script her into sounding like everyone else. They will let her speak in her own rhythm. Let her describe the game the way she actually processes it. Let her offer the perspective of someone who is currently game planning against elite athletes, not recalling strategies from a decade ago. Because the value of having Clark on that panel is not repetition. It's originality. She is living a basketball experience none of the retired legends on that set are living right now. She feels defensive pressure weekly. She sees how teams scheme in today's analytics-driven era. She adjusts to modern tempo in real time.
Caitlin Clark scoreless. It's 5:51 left in the first quarter.
That immediacy is powerful. But there is another side to this story, one that cannot be ignored. The pessimistic scenario exists. If the WNBA season is delayed or canceled due to collective bargaining negotiations, and Clark is visible every week on NBC discussing NBA basketball, some fans will interpret that as distance. Some will argue she should be using that platform to advocate loudly and relentlessly for league improvements rather than building her own media presence. Fair or unfair, that criticism will come. Because optics matter. Imagine a prolonged labor dispute. Imagine mid-tier WNBA players feeling financial strain. Imagine headlines about revenue splits and charter flights and salary caps dominating sports pages. Now imagine Clark thriving on national television, analyzing million-dollar NBA contracts and championship aspirations. The image is complicated. She would not be betraying anyone by fulfilling contractual media obligations. She would not be undermining a union by honoring agreements signed in good faith. But perception in professional sports is rarely purely rational. Resentment can grow quietly. And the optics of the highest-profile WNBA star discussing millionaire NBA athletes while her colleagues fight for improved conditions could create uncomfortable narratives. There's also a different long-term risk. What if her media career grows so rapidly that it begins to eclipse her playing career? What if casual fans start identifying her first as an NBA analyst and only secondarily as a WNBA player? That inversion would be unprecedented at this stage of an athlete's prime. NBC would welcome that trajectory. A signature personality who can anchor coverage for years regardless of injuries, trades, or league politics is a network dream. But for the WNBA, losing its biggest active star to broadcasting dominance before she reaches her full athletic peak would be a structural blow. The league has invested in her visibility. Fans have invested emotionally in her journey. The question becomes one of balance. Can she elevate both simultaneously? Or will one eventually overshadow the other?
Crowd here at Mohegan Sun. First bucket for Clark.
When that February 1st broadcast begins, it is not just an analyst's debut. It is a live case study in women's sports economics. It tests whether WNBA stars can build mainstream media identities while still competing at an elite level. It tests whether networks are willing to treat women's basketball intelligence as universally relevant rather than niche. It tests whether audiences will accept insight without attaching gender qualifiers. This is NBC making a multi-year bet. They believe the Caitlin Clark phenomenon is sustainable. They believe it can expand across platforms. They believe it is valuable enough to anchor programming around. That belief will be validated or challenged in real time. The stage is enormous. The Lakers, the Knicks, Madison Square Garden. A panel featuring Hall of Fame-caliber basketball minds. And Clark seated among them. If she delivers, if she identifies an action before it unfolds on screen, if she breaks down a defensive adjustment in a way casual viewers understand, if she offers a player's perspective that reframes what audiences are watching, then something shifts. Her presence stops being experimental. It becomes essential. It becomes proof that the biggest stars in women's sports can cross into mainstream sports media without retiring first. It becomes a model for future athletes, not just in basketball but across leagues, to consider dual career trajectories while still competing. But if she struggles, if nerves flatten her voice, if analysis feels surface level, if chemistry falters, critics will seize the moment. They will argue active players should focus exclusively on performance. They will claim crossover media ambitions distract from athletic development. They will frame the experiment as overreach. There will be no neutral outcome. Every sentence will carry amplified meaning. That is the weight of trailblazing. And yet, if history is any guide, pressure tends to sharpen her rather than shrink her. She has played through hostile arenas. She has absorbed physical defense designed to intimidate. She has navigated media storms that would overwhelm most rookies. A studio desk is a different battlefield, but it is still a battlefield she seems prepared to enter. The optimistic projection is compelling. Clark analyzes NBA games during the WNBA offseason. NBA fans grow accustomed to her voice. They appreciate her clarity. They follow her social media. They become curious about her playing career. When the WNBA season tips off, those viewers tune in out of familiarity. Basketball stays in the conversation year-round. Clark becomes a connector. She keeps the sport in front of casual fans even when the Women's League is not actively playing. She reduces the seasonal visibility gap that has historically limited momentum. And if that loop strengthens over time, it could redefine how star power operates within the WNBA. For decades, off-season silence slowed growth. This strategy eliminates silence. But again, it hinges on performance. February 1st is not just another date on the sports calendar. It is a high-stakes experiment, a collision of ambition and opportunity, a test of articulation under lights, a test of perception under scrutiny, a test of whether one athlete can simultaneously elevate her league, expand her brand, and reshape expectations. One night, one desk, countless implications. Will she redefine what it means to hold influence in modern basketball? Will she expand the ceiling for WNBA players beyond court boundaries? Or will this gamble expose the tension between personal leverage and collective responsibility? The answer won't arrive in a single sentence. It will unfold possession by possession, comment by comment, reaction by reaction. And when the final buzzer sounds in Madison Square Garden, the true impact may not be reflected in the box score. It will echo in conversations about media power, about labor leverage, about gender representation, about the evolving definition of a basketball superstar. Because this is not just about analysis. It's about architecture. The architecture of a new kind of career. And Caitlin Clark is stepping directly into the blueprint.